Hi, Angela Ray here. I am so excited to be a part of a live stream today to continue our discussion about what's happening in Flint, Michigan, the water crisis there. Joining me today is Jack Olmstead, who is just the man. He is from Port
Townsend,
Townsend, Washington. And I'm a big Washington State girl because that's where my man's from. So, hey, Jack, glad you're a part of this discussion. Also, Mike Connell is joining us. Mike, where are you?
I'm in Port Huron, Michigan. So it's about an hour east of Flint.
Okay, perfect.
It's where Detroit and Flint get their water.
Got you. Okay. And also joining us is Schatzie Dudee. Schatzie has written some amazing articles about not only what's happening in Flint, Michigan, but she's expanded it to show that this is a problem not just in this country, but this is a problem in the world. But she has done such a great job of just sort of folding that all into what has happened in Flint, Michigan. She goes deep, which is why I love and adore newspaper reporters or someone like her. She has a blog. She can go deep and she can really do the research to get the answers for us. And this is what she's done. She's got legal documents. She's got all sorts of documentation to back up what she is saying. And what she is saying is not pretty. So, Schatzie, we are so happy to have you joining us today on this live stream to continue our discussion about the water crisis in Michigan. So, can you just let us know, where are you from?
I'm originally from California, from Northern California, but I now live in Kentucky by way of Washington, D.C. And I had heard about what was going on in Detroit a long time ago, but not very deeply. And then last year I heard about Flint on Rachel Maddow's show. And I was sitting with my kids who are teenagers, and they were so mad. They were so upset because Rachel laid it out so well in a narrative, you know, about Rick Snyder's emergency managers. These are things we didn't have a clue about. And so I just kept looking into it and reading about it and trying to back up and get a bigger picture about what was going on, because it's myopic to just look at what happened to Flint. I wanted to see how could that happen on a larger scale. And it continues to be baffling and not very uplifting, but we're getting
we are. And Schatzie, and to bring the other gentleman in, I know that when I was at the hearings last week, I think it was Tuesday or Wednesday, Jack, and listening to my delegate, notice I have to call her a delegate and not a congresswoman, I'll keep that moving, Eleanor Holmes Norton, she reminded us about the situation here in D.C. in 2000 where there was lead and what happened, and I didn't even remember this. And then another congressperson even added on to that just how awful it was. But this is happening all over the United States. But somebody in Michigan had the balls, they had the guts to get this to the media, and that's what it takes.
Yes, yes. I think what became really obvious to me is that the mainstream media really didn't touch on it, but once you scratch the surface, I came to realize there are hundreds of articles that local reporters did and local bloggers and people who are thoroughly embedded in that community. They provided so much information, you just had to know it was a problem. And I mean, I'm amazed at what they've reported.
Jack, were you surprised, back to what Schatzie was just saying, that there had been so many articles written, there had been conversations about what was going on, yet the mainstream media hadn't picked up on it?
Well, the mainstream media has been covering the story
thanks to Rachel.
For years and years. Well, Rachel picked up on it in December, but this has been a story that has been going on for years and years. 2010, 2004, when there was money put out to buy some lakefront property on Lake Huron to get the KWA, the Karenandi pipeline built. So, but the mainstream press reports with a frame around the government and how this is going to be good. So I believe the the mainstream media, especially in Michigan, are partly responsible for the situation that the Flint residents find themselves in, because they continue to beat the drum. The water is safe. The water is safe. It smells.
Mike.
It's discolored, but it's safe. And up until the middle of December, when the new mayor, Karen Weaver, made her declaration of emergency in the city, the mainstream media, the Flint Journal, they were still beating the drum of the government that everything's okay, that the water is safe.
So what you're saying is the mainstream media, it seems to me what you're saying is the mainstream media really didn't do its job. They just sort of parroted whatever was handed to them. This is a problem I have with the media.
They were lapdogs, they weren't watchdogs. And maybe they were watchdogs at some instance, but really the way they frame their articles, they always gave the government the last word. They would throw in a resident's quote, but they would have 4 quotes from the government or from an agency saying that, listen to the experts. These are the experts, and these are residents. They're kind of like a bubble off plum here. So when you read their accounts, you really don't really get a sense that the residents had to, they weren't a credible source.
Let's bring Mike Connell into this. Mike, you live close to Flint.
Well, the media's not, I'm a little wary of mainstream media or liberal press because it's not monolithic. And particularly when you're talking about local newspapers, the Port Huron paper for years has said the KWA pipeline was a travesty and should be stopped, and it was a waste of money, and that the governors, Jennifer Granholm first and Rick Snyder later, had not taken their responsibility to protect the public interest and stop it. So that in that case, in that paper, is if either governor had listened to the Port Huron paper, this would have never happened. They would still be drinking water from Lake Huron. But in fairness, like Flint, when they first converted to the Flint River water, the Flint Journal wrote an editorial about how wonderful it was and how it was going to, how it was going to save money, and it was a smart move, and just gave it a ringing endorsement. So that's on the record. Anybody can find that editorial. But Ron Fonger, the editorial for the Flint Journal, was also doing stories with from people like Aaron Brockovich, who said, "Hey, this water is, you're poison." Well, even before we knew it was lead poisoning, she said, how would you have people drink what she called poop water?
Yeah.
I
wrote she was on. Aaron was on Bill Maher this week on Friday, and I didn't realize. Of course, it would be logical that she would have something to do with Flint, but we've got other people who are fighting for Flint, not just Aaron Brockovich.
Well, and you realize she was only on there because she was taking Michael Moore's place because he got pneumonia.
Yes.
And that's what she filled in for him. Yeah.
Thank you. So, Bill, I'm a big fan of Bill's, but she should have been on the, we needed her. Thank goodness Michael couldn't make it. That just worked out perfectly, because now we have even more people getting outraged about this. Back to the mainstream media. Rachel Maddow deserves more than a pat on the back, because she is the dog with the bone, like you are, Schatzie. She's nothing but you. Y'all are the same. Wonderful people, journalists, with dog with a bone. And she has the platform. And although MSNBC has changed its whole formula to not be so much with the liberal politics 24/7, they've allowed Rachel to stay in place because she is doing some very good work.
Her ratings are going up.
Yeah, because
as a result of her coverage, her ratings are going up.
Wow.
See what can happen, people? This is exactly, and the same is true for you, Schatzie, or you, Jack, or Mike. Or me. We're doing things that matter, and people want to hear about this. I want to know, Schatzie. I want to get back to you and the first article you wrote, where you really sort of lay out, and you have a legal document included, and Jack is able to roll off his tongue the name of the KWA. I'm going to leave that for you to pronounce
KWA.
that. But how is it this water authority appears to be at the crux of everything?
Well, I will defer to Mike on this since he knows the back history of it, but it truly appears that people wanted to break up DWSD, Detroit Water and Sewerage, which has now been cleaved off and become Great Lakes Water Authority, with a very small compartment of that serving just Detroit. Am I correct, Mike?
Well, yeah, it's a regional water system that was originally the city of Detroit ran it, and now it's a regional. Yes.
And it's been basically green lighted for privatization. That's kind of the problem. I mean, that's one of the problems. Mm-hmm. And I will just say that this is very troubling. I heard this morning that Deutsche Bank in Germany issued some very big warnings. And they have a real problem with their credit default swap spread. And on my website, and I could tell you where to look, also on the KWA website, they have $120 million, 73% apparently of the KWA money is tied up with Deutsche Bank. And
what? And Deutsche Bank is having problems?
Big problems. That was this morning. They've been having problems, but there was an outside audit done of KWA, and I'm very upset because I really think that the people of Flint and the people who are going to pay for KWA might get stuck with a lot of bigger debt than they thought. And
Mike, Mike, what do you think about this?
Yeah, Mike, what do you think?
Well, I mean, yeah, one of the drain commissioners in Genesee County actually warned that the city would never, or the county would never be able to afford the bond payments. So my personal, I mean, just kind of an overarching thing is water is not regulated in the way that other utilities are. You know, our Public Service Commission regulates electrical rates, it regulates natural gas, it regulates ferry if you have a ferry service, but it doesn't regulate water. And you know, and that all these municipal, like Detroit Water, goes to 127 different communities, and Detroit delivers the water to the front door, and then those communities charge whatever, you know, whatever price they want to for their customers, and that varies all over the map. But there's nobody really does. I mean, it's just become a cash cow for communities. There's no PSC, there's no consumer protection, there's no voice for the consumer in setting those rates. So a lot of the problems we have with this water war that erupted between Detroit and Flint, or between Wayne County and Genesee County, is because it was over the rates that were being charged. And I don't understand why we don't regulate that in some form. Not that I believe that the PSC stands up for the consumer in Michigan, because it doesn't. It's now run by executives, a power company, former power company executive. But I don't think they have the consumer's interest in mind. But at least they, you know, ostensibly are looking out for the consumer's interest. There's nobody doing that now.
Well, that's true. And Jack, what do we do about that? No one's looking out for the consumer with respect to water?
Yeah, that's pretty crazy. Actually, I wanted to get back with Mike. Can you talk about the water wars? What was the bone of contention? Why was there such conflict between Detroit and Flint?
Well, it's money, of course, in controlling. Water is a cash cow for every community, you know, in Michigan. That's where you get your money to build whatever you're going to do. I mean, it's the only place you can turn if you're a community to have money. But to go way back 50 years ago, Flint went to build a water line from Lake Huron, and there was a profiteering scandal. The city manager and one of his friends bought the property on the lake shore, and then resold it to the city at a big profit. Profit today would be about $250,000. And now the judge threw that out. He said there was nothing wrong, but it was so obviously such a blatant wrongdoing that the public outrage killed the Flint water line in 1963. So the next year in '64, Flint signed a 30-year deal with Detroit to buy water from Detroit. Those days, Detroit was a world-class water operation, and they built a water treatment plant on the Lake Huron shore, and they built an intake that's 6 miles out in the lake. And it seems, if that seems crazy, Jack, do you want me to get into all this history, or is this too much?
Well, what do you guys think? I think it's very fascinating because the mainstream media has amnesia on it. They don't understand that this goes back to 1963.
No,
Yeah,
they don't. They start in the middle. So what Mike is saying is great.
Well, going back to when Detroit's, you remember this was the Cold War, and we're all scared that the Soviets are going to blast us off the face of the earth. And Detroit is a prime target. Everybody agrees that towns like Detroit and Seattle and Pittsburgh are going to be the first places hit. So the fear in Detroit, as crazy as it might seem today, was that an atomic bomb would hit Lake St. Clair, which is right at Detroit. It's a relatively shallow lake. It's only about 11 feet deep on average. And it would vaporize that lake, and Detroit wouldn't have drinking water. So they wanted a deep water intake on Lake Huron, and they also, at that point, had just signed this deal with Flint. And they're also expecting Detroit at that time is a city of 2 million people, and they're expecting it to grow and grow and grow, which of course it doesn't, but that was the expectation in the mid-60s. So they built this tunnel that's 230 feet deep. They mined a tunnel through the hard rock. They brought in miners from Tennessee and Kentucky, along with local guys, to build this tunnel. And out on the water intake, somebody got loose with a torch and dropped it into the tunnel, and it ignited the methane, and it killed 22 miners. But anyway, they continue. So that's the worst industrial accident in the history of Michigan's Lower Peninsula. But that was in 1971. But they eventually, get the water line open, and they have a pipeline that goes. It's from the water treatment plant on the shores of Lake Huron in northern St. Clair County. It goes across St. Clair County to Imlay City. It's a 10-foot pipe. It's a 10-foot main, which means it's the size of a basketball rim. You could drive a truck. In fact, they have driven trucks down it when they were building it. And it goes to Imlay City area, and there it splits. And what part of the pipeline, part of the water goes on to Flint, and the other part goes south into Oakland, into Detroit's northern suburbs. So this water line was built to furnish 1.2 billion gallons a day of treated water. That's the capacity, right? It's never been used even half that. Probably not even more than a third of that capacity has ever been used, because Detroit just didn't grow the way. Detroit never grew the way people thought it would. So you have a perfectly good pipeline. This water.
I've got a question. Why didn't Detroit grow like people expected?
Well, yeah, there was a study by a man named Doxiadis, was an urban planner from Greece, from Athens, who predicted that just really tremendous growth in Detroit. But a lot of things happened. The Arab oil embargo, Japanese auto imports, the race riots in Detroit, all those things combined. Detroit in 1965, say, was a much bigger city than Toronto in population. Culturally was more sophisticated, architecturally, much more magnificent than Toronto. Toronto embraced diversity. 50% of the people in Toronto were not born in Canada. Detroit didn't embrace diversity. Toronto thrives, is now one of the largest cities in North America. I think the third or fourth, maybe top 5. Detroit is, I'm not even sure if Detroit's still in the top 10 largest cities in the country.
But Mike, when you say that Detroit did not embrace diversity, what do we mean by that?
I mean the region, the metropolitan Detroit is fought with itself, I think. That's my personal opinion now, is that rather than looking and forging a new future, we fight with each other, and we squabble over what if Detroit's getting something, or should the suburbs get something. And we never do anything about the greater good. It's all split up into these little provinces, these little feuding provinces. It's the most segregated city region in the United States, statistically, as far as where people live in neighborhoods. Detroit is the most segregated city in the country, in the continent.
And Detroit is what's the percentage of African American population there?
Well, in Detroit, I think it's 70%. It's actually the white population is now growing again for the first time in decades. But it's, Detroit's about 700,000 people now, and it was a city of 2 million in 1950, 1960. So it's, it's lost
A lot of attrition, yeah.
65% of its population. So, I mean, Detroit itself. Now, the region itself is, 4.5 million people, so it'd be similar to the San Francisco Bay Area in population.
Schatzie, I wanted to ask you something about your article. You said that the majority of current investigations and FOIA, Freedom of Information Act requests and subpoenas are not looking in the right place. Explain to me what you mean, because obviously there are people doing investigative work on this issue. Yes. Now they have in the past, but you're saying you're overlooking something.
I think they're underlooking something. I think that if they just focus on Flint and who knew what when, I mean, that's coming out really well, but they need to back up and look at the bigger issue about how Flint got committed to something that A, they didn't need, B, that didn't make sense, and that C, is going to hobble their economy further. I mean, the thing about KWA, in reading their incorporation documents, is that it was supposed to be for a lot of people. It was supposed to be for several different counties. The membership of the board of that organization clearly lays out that right from the beginning, almost like 3 months after it was formed, that they planned to sell water, a lot of water, to someone else, and it was other than citizens. So I really think people need to focus bigger and broader and further back. And the Freedom of Information Act requests are being turned down. I've seen that. And there is now something that got passed by a representative named Heise, H-E-I-S-E, and I will look up the number of the bill, but it says it's to protect Freedom of Information Act, to keep Freedom of Information Act requests away from cybersecurity, but actually that's not what it is. If you read it, it's about energy and pipeline infrastructure, and it is a way for people who don't want other people to know what is going on to not be able to get the information. And so I can't figure out how much further back this goes, because there is going to be potentially a very deep waste site for nuclear waste on the other side of the lake in Canada. Then TransCanada is trying to come down with pipelines, and we have Veolia Water, which is like in the top 3 biggest water privatization companies in the world. They have been embedded in Michigan water politics, and they also definitely have very deep pockets. And I think that there are all these class action lawsuits and people looking to sue someone. And I wrote about Lockwood, Andrews, and Newnham, who were the engineers. And I think they've been, I mean, in my opinion, they're extremely negligent. They green-lighted Flint's water and allowed it to be switched without being treated. But I just hope people keep looking a little deeper and wider and try to figure out why this happened. The symptom of what they were up to is Flint and the lead in the water. But that's a symptom of something I think is much bigger. So.
Well, you know, and I wanted to talk about the infrastructure, and maybe Mike can help us here. I mean, the infrastructure, just in this country, period, all infrastructure needs to be, we've got to do something. I mean, bridges are crumbling, everything's crumbling. But our water supply system is a part of that as well. And Mike, it seems like everything needs to be redone. I don't know how to do it, but yeah. Your thoughts?
Yeah, years ago I talked to a fellow from SEMCOG, which is the Southeastern Michigan Council of Government, who said if we could see our sewers and our water systems, we talk about crumbling roads and sidewalks, but if we could see our sewers and water systems, we would all be appalled. It's out of sight and out of mind. Our grandparents made these investments in sewer and water, and we're living on those investments. We're not doing anything to maintain them or to
Why aren't we?
Too little.
I mean,
Well,
isn't there money set aside, whether it's state money or federal money, to handle infrastructure issues?
well,
Oh yeah,
I
we're
mean,
talking about federal money. Ha ha.
yeah. Well, I mean, use this example here. We have this perfectly good Detroit water main. It's a pipeline. I mean, it's not what 40 some years old. There's no reason to replace it after 40 years. It's a pipeline. I mean, if you just maintain it. But they built. Flint goes out and builds a parallel 6 miles apart. It's literally 6 miles. They're parallel water lines. Flint's now one difference is Detroit's water is treated at its treatment plant. Flint's water is not treated, and there is a belief that there's a lot of fracking leases been signed along that route, and there was a lot of oil and gas in this area that they took in the 1890s, and there's still some gas and oil wells, but it's not a big deal. But now they're talking about fracking, so there's a belief that they were going to sell the water for fracking. But and they also Detroit Edison was going to build atomic power plants along here, and so but after 3 Mile and they didn't build those atomic power plants, but those power plants were going to use a lot of water. In fact, that's where Flint bought its water intake property from Detroit Edison, where Detroit Edison was going to build water lines to its nuclear plants, but they built natural gas plants instead, and so they're going to buy water from Flint. But yeah, I mean, so Flint is taking like 85 million gallons a day of untreated water out of the lake. They're spending 400 million or whatever for the pipeline, just the pipeline. Then they have to build water treatment plants at every town. Every town is like Lapeer or Flint or wherever. The water's got to be treated. So they're going to spend probably $1 billion to a water system that just replaces something that exists. And the problem in Michigan is there's no adult supervision. There's nobody. There's no governor. We had a Democratic governor in Jennifer Granholm and a Republican governor in Rick Snyder. There's no adult who can step up and say, folks, this is insane. Flint said we're doing this because Detroit is gouging us on water rates. Well, I mean, that's questionable whether that's true. But even if it is true to an extent, the governor could have gone to Detroit and said, no, you've got to play fair. And if you don't, I'll do this and this and this to you, because governors do have power. And said, and tell Flint, you can't waste. They could have spent that $1 billion to do what? Maybe replace the lead lines in Flint, for instance. But instead, we've just wasted. And Flint's never going to be able. Genesee County's. I really truly believe they're not going to be able to pay for that without going to Washington for a bailout. I don't think there's any possibility that they're going to pay for it.
Well, Mike, the federal government, I mean, with the exception of whatever percentage should be handed to Flint or Michigan versus Texas or somewhere else, the federal government hasn't been all that excited about giving additional monies. If I'm wrong, let me know, but right now I thought that there's not any additional monies outside of some initial money going to Flint. It needs more, far more.
Every city in the country has it. Well, every older city in the country has this problem with lead. Lead water lines are everywhere. Port Huron has lead water lines. So, I mean, is the federal government going to do everybody?
Exactly. I mean, yeah, I hear you. Yeah.
If we didn't fight wars, maybe we could spend the money on things like water.
Oh, Mike, that's a hand clap for what Mike just said. If we didn't fight wars, we'd have money for this. Schatzie, I'm sorry, darling.
I was just going to say, to your point, is that the $80 million in federal aid promised by President Obama is actually already, Michigan has already paid into that. They're not getting 1 cent more than they have already paid into. I found an article. I'm just looking for it. It says the federal 2016 omnibus spending bill is $1.4 billion towards the Clean Water State Revolving Fund. That exists. It's for every state. And then what President Obama did is he took Michigan's portion, which would be, 4.75% or $66 million of that fund. And then Snyder said he would match it with 14 million, which equals what the federal government is giving. They're not giving a penny more than already exists for Michigan.
And furthermore, back to what you said, you have to match. The funds have to be matched.
It's a very strict guideline. There's not 1 cent more for this mess than Michigan has already been allotted well before Flint with their water poisoned. So this is nothing. Plus, there's no oversight on how it's spent. The governor can spend it any way he wants. He is not committed. He is not legally committed to spending it in Flint. And so I would just ask people to question whether they trust his judgment about where he's going to spend the money.
Well, to that point, I fear for Flint. I think Flint, Flint was a struggling town and has been a struggling town for many years. And its population is going from 200,000 to 100,000. 99,000. Yeah, and I fear for the Flint. I wonder if Flint can survive this. What's going to happen?
I agree.
Who's going to move to Flint? What's going to happen to the property tax base, which they rely upon?
I agree. And furthermore, Mike, I didn't realize this, and this is very common in heavily minority areas, but there is not a grocery store in Flint,
right.
which leads into food deserts and going down that rabbit hole. But my goodness, back to what you're saying, I don't know if they can survive this. That is my concern.
Flint is 43% white, and and a lot of the neighborhoods that were hurt the worst with this are the ones that are predominantly white neighborhoods. So it goes across. It's not just it's poor people. It's not so much black or white.
That's right.
Class warfare is what it is.
And that is exactly what I said in my commentary. If you're poor in this country, you're SOL.
If this had happened to a wealthy community,
that's what I said in my commentary. I said if this happened to Grosse Pointe, it would have never, ever. This is okay.
Unquestionably, yeah.
Let me ask you guys something. Did you all ever watch the 007 movie Skyfall? If so, I mean, how prescient they actually did the issue on the privatization of water. And you got to see it. I mean, it's amazing the way they weave the narrative in there. But what you had is bad people, bad elements, just buying up water. It was a bait and switch too. You think it's this is what they're doing? No. What they're doing is they're buying up all this water.
Ah. Well, okay,
and
now
privatization scares me.
It's bad. Yeah, you're exactly right. Think about it like this, okay? You have this whole new pipeline, KWA pipeline, this entire project, as Mike said, 6 miles from the existing pipeline. The entire thing is for 66% Genesee County and 34%. Now, this is the financial responsibility of Flint, which just under 100,000 people, has 34% of the responsibility for that whole pipeline, which to me seems like somebody's just trying to choke the life out of that.
I'm sorry, I was having a hard time hearing you. You were going in and out.
You broke up. Can you say that again?
Yeah.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, a little bit better.
Can you hear me now?
The issue is your broadband, is your Wi-Fi connection. It goes
Jack
up and
likes
down.
to tell us all of our broadband is bad, but his.
I'm hardwired into it. I've been down this
road before, huh?
That's right.
Mike
so I'm hardwired.
Yeah.
Well, it's amazing that Mike is doing fine. He's in a snowstorm. He's in a blizzard in Michigan right now.
Mike is like chilling like a villain in a snowstorm, coming up with all the right answers and no problem with his internet.
That's Michigan. That's what Michigan looks like right now.
I've been looking out his window when he's saying it's beautiful watching the snowfall.
It is. And I love that he positioned himself that way. Well done, Mike.
So if you can say that one more
both
time.
Of you guys were talking about. Yeah, talk about that one more time because I had some more about the corporations.
Okay, so to me, I will tell you that there's a very knowledgeable man in Flint. His name is Alec Gibbs. He's an attorney. And I found some articles he wrote, and I called him, and I just said, is this the reality of it is that KWA is only for essentially the county of Genesee. The financial responsibility is Genesee County is 66%, I think, responsible for the project, and Little Flint of just 100,000, which didn't need a pipeline to start, is responsible for 34% of it, which to me seems insane. It seems like somebody is just trying to just wipe out Flint.
You know, you talk about the nefarious way corporations monkey with our infrastructure. It's not just water; it's all of our infrastructure. That is what I got from what you wrote. Can you kind of give us a little more about that? And I got a funny feeling Mike has got something to say too, which is a good thing.
Mike, do you want to jump in since I just was speaking?
Well, no, I'll go. You go ahead and listen to it. I'll listen to your answer here.
Yeah, because this is your article that I'm actually quoting. Well, I put my nefarious in there, but it's all of our infrastructure that corporations are controlling. That's revolutionary. I hadn't heard that.
Well, your article, by the way, it was a wonderful article. I was really impressed. I mean, I learned quite a bit, and I've been looking at this for years, and there was quite a few things that I had not seen.
Thank you. I'm really trying to find where this leads, but the thing I try to educate my readers. I have about 300,000 readers from, I don't know, like 85 countries or something, and there are some constants. And the constant in this country, which seeps out, I've found abroad, is that people need to not trust corporations. Corporations are not people.
Oh, well, now, according to some politicians, corporations are people.
You know, this is where we let our guard down, and the only thing that corporations can be trusted to do is look out for their own self-interest. The only reason they are corporations is to perpetuate their business model. I mean, it's not a judgment. It's essentially that's how they are created. And so people need to understand that when we start privatizing things that we need to survive, is happening more and more and going to happen more and more, and we lose control and we put our trust in something which is akin to Medusa. I mean, you know, this is the way we need to think. Just because people come on television or on the radio and there's a face to that corporation does not mean it's a person. It doesn't mean it cares about any of us, our plants, our animals, humans. I read so many lawsuits and different legal actions against corporations, and for the most part, they are hardly ever forced to admit wrongdoing. There's rarely criminal prosecution ever, and essentially they're not sorry. And people need to understand that if a corporation is involved in your town, your city, whatever, you need to protect yourself.
Well, I think another point is that these are complicated issues. This story with Flint, it seems like it came out of the blue. People are being poisoned or they're dying of Legionnaire's disease. It seems like it comes out of the blue, but it doesn't. It evolves over years. And they're difficult. You can't do it in a sound bite, and it doesn't play on TV. You know, the Detroit TV had no interest in this story. They were certainly, the TV stations there were certainly told about it, but you know, it's not a kind of a story they can delve into.
That is unacceptable. I'm a television journalist. That is unacceptable. I know too many investigative reporters who are television people who do excellent work, and the fact that Detroit did not want to touch this is unacceptable. Unacceptable. You cannot call yourself a journalist if you didn't want to touch this story that is in your state. Explain that to me, Detroit media.
Not just to pick on TV, but the Detroit news, the Free Press and the news, we're not.
The newspaper
and
didn't
Journal,
either?
For that matter, we're not upset about the fact that we're going to spend $1 billion to duplicate something that existed. It wasn't happening close enough to them, or at least to,
But Mike, where does all this money come from? I keep hearing $1 billion here. What the heck? Where's this money coming from?
They're borrowing it.
Borrowing it, bonds.
Oh no! So now let's go into debt. Oy vey.
Yes. Yeah.
Like Jack says, the interest. What we don't know what it's going to cost because we haven't seen what the interest payments are going to be. We won't know until it's all said and done.
Mm-hmm. Listen to that. I hope you heard that. What Mike just said. We're not going to know the full cost until we get the interest for all that stuff is in there. Then we're going to know. That's important.
Well, I'd like to jump in here. Can we talk about Jeff Wright? Can we talk about Jeff Wright? I think he kind of is the kingpin for this whole situation.
So Schatzie, thank you, Jack. That's good. Can you tell us who is this fella? Jack.
Jeffrey Wright.
Jeffrey. You know, that's an actor who, by the way, was in the same 007 movie. We'll keep it moving. It's a different guy, though.
Well, he's a good actor. I'll put it that way. I mean, he's a salesman for sure, and he's been in the project for a long time. In just kind of doing research, I saw that he had an FBI investigation against him, and I wrote about this. And
Schatzie, hold on a second. You're kind of going in and out again. So just can you tell us again, who is Jeffrey Wright?
Okay. Yes, he is first and foremost the Genesee County Drain Commissioner.
He's a Genesee County
Drain
Commissioner. Drain Commissioner.
Yes.
There is something called a Drain Commissioner. Got you. Okay.
Yeah, apparently Michigan. Yes, it's a Michigan thing. And
okay.
But concurrently and more to the point, he is the person, one of the people who was the driving force in creating KWA. And he's the one who's been pushing it and selling it. And when there are reports that it's not in the best interest of citizens, he would downplay those reports. And to me, from what I saw, it looked like misinformation, really. I mean, he was heavily pushing this project.
Was he was he subpoenaed by Washington, D.C.?
I don't think so.
Not yet.
No, I don't believe so.
Not yet.
Anyone there? There's a mic. Schatzie, do we know, was he subpoenaed by Washington, D.C.?
I don't believe so. And the thing here is that, to me, is very interesting, is he had an FBI investigation into his, Mike, was it his campaign? I can't remember. His campaign to be drain commissioner? Yes, that was it. And he, which went nowhere, he became a confidential informant against some other corruption in Michigan politics. So,
thus shielding himself from prosecution with respect to other issues. Wow.
Well, you know, Republicans are getting a lot of criticism for this debacle, and rightfully so. But the Democrats don't have clean hands. It was the Democratic political machines in Wayne County and Genesee County that kind of set the stage with their water wars. And Jeff Wright sold this by saying Detroit is gouging us, and you know they're stealing from us, and our water rates of, you know, we're paying $18 million for water, what cost us $9 million a couple years ago, and that public bought that, and they embraced that narrative that, you know, Detroit is ripping us off. And then we find out that Kwame Kilpatrick is using Detroit Water and Sewerage Board he and his dad are using it as their personal ATM.
Mike, did you see, Mike, last week, I think it was, Kwame wrote an article or something, and basically he was saying that, you know, he was able to foretell what was going to happen in Flint, that, you know, they've been telling people about, in other words, you know, everything I said came to pass, and you guys didn't listen to me, and why am I in jail? So,
well, I don't know if that exonerates him from putting money in his pocket, but I do think
it does not.
I think it's true that that the blame that Jeff Wright put on Detroit was a little misplaced, and
Mm-hmm.
Jack knows this better than I do, but Detroit would deliver, like I say, would deliver the treated water to a front door of these 127 communities, and they turned around and sold it. Well, Flint at one point, and this is like 2 years ago, was buying water for, I want to say it was $13 for 1,000 cubic feet, and then reselling it for $75 to its customers. To the poor families in Flint, on average, are spending $1,700 a year for water. I mean, these are not rich people. $1,700 a year for something as basic as to have water in your house. That's just the average.
If what Mike didn't say, if what Mike just said doesn't impact you, doesn't hurt your heart, then you don't have a heart. This is unbelievable. So they charged them.
Flint wasn't alone in this. I mean, other communities some communities would buy water for, say, where Detroit's paying Flint's paying $13, they would buy it for $5 or $6, and then mark it up to $50 or $60. So they were marking it up tenfold. And I say there's no regulation for these water rates. There's no Public Service Commission oversight. They can pretty much, I mean, they can pretty much set the rates wherever they want to. And our legislature stripped these communities of their revenue sharing, of all these promises that were made over the year. They took away their personal property tax income, which is kind of esoteric, but the state legislature has stripped the communities of the power to raise funds in just about every way except water. So water is their cash cow, and that's where, that's all that's left to them, and they're riding that horse, as far as they can. And the public pays. And it's a tax that's just as onerous, more onerous on the poor. The poorer you are, the worse it is for you, because you got to pay for water as much as the rich guy. I mean, it's water. The price of water is the price of water, and everybody has to have it.
Right, that's right. But it shouldn't be out of the reach of people to pay.
Yeah.
Yes, Shanti.
Well, here's something else I came across that was weird, strange. When Flint decided, or it was decided for them, and I'm not talking the 7-to-1 vote, because those people did not have control over the situation. That was, I think, trying to cover somebody else's shenanigans. When they decided to not use Detroit water, they said, we are going to make our own pipeline, blah, 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 and they just said, we are going to stop using it. Here's the thing. They didn't need a contract to get Detroit water. There are plenty of others that access DWSD's water, or did access it, and had no active contract. And so I don't think this is anything more than not understanding what was going on. I think they switched to Flint River thinking they were going to get cut off from Detroit, which was never going to be the case, ever. And so...
Well, why did they think that?
I really don't know. I really don't know. But I never, ever found anything or any reason for the people who made the decision to switch to Flint River's water to do that, because they could have kept using Detroit's water. They didn't need an active contract. Is that your understanding, Mike, also?
Yeah. I mean, Flint was drawing water from the river years and before they had Detroit water. So they've always said the Flint River there as a backup. But why they decided to cut off from Detroit, I never really understood the politics of that. I mean, to save a small amount of money, it never made any sense to me that they would cut the water that was so obviously so bad. I mean, from the first moment they turned the pipe on.
So, Mike, yeah, I agree with you. So, are we dealing with bad people? People who don't care about their citizens, their constituents? I mean, I'd like to think that people are better than this. I don't understand.
Well, my personal take on it is it has to, at this point, when everything fails, when it's a systematic failure over every level, that it goes back to culture. And I wonder if we've created at one time, I mean, I remember President Nixon signing the Clean Water Act back about 1970, and I grew up along a river that was so polluted you couldn't swim in it. Now people go out there and water ski in it. I mean, we clean things up, but it seems like there's been a change now, and we're more, instead of worrying about pure water and safe drinking water, we're more into how much money can we save and how onerous are our regulations on business. And the people who lead
Which goes
these
back to your
agencies,
point of it's not regulated, so no one's looking out for these sorts of issues.
Well, also, the governor appoints one of his political cronies to run the DEQ, or the State Department of Environmental Quality. That's not a professional person. Detroit Water, when it built this pipeline to Flint, was led by professional engineers who were covered by civil service. And it was a world-class operation. It truly was. When Coleman Young was the mayor, he had the city charter redone so that he gets to appoint the head of that water department. Kwame Kilpatrick's director of water went to prison. He brought in a guy from Puerto Rico to run it. Yeah, and they were, using it as, again, they were siphoning money out of it along with the water. So it becomes a cultural thing. I think the DEQ was less about, my personal opinion, I can't prove this, but I think that they were more about saving taxpayer money and not interfering with the businesses, over-regulating businesses. That was more of a priority to them than protecting people. That their original purpose was to give us clean drinking water. And I grew up believing I can drink from any tap in the country. I can go anywhere in the country and turn on the tap and I can drink that water and not worry about it. And that's just being thrown away. The idea that you would buy a bottle of water when I was a kid, that would be laughable. Why would you waste money to buy water?
Exactly. I mean, the fact that we even started bottling water was very odd to me. I want to talk about, and I know you guys can definitely talk about the use of emergency financial managers, which end up turning into emergency managers, which these people have just ruined city after city. But Detroit, Michigan loves to use them. This governor loves using them. And people, anybody watching, these emergency managers only report to the governor.
Right. Yeah, there's no accountability. And I highly suspect that if people just focus on the emergency managers, which is not a good system. It's like downright undemocratic.
So what is that system? Is it akin to if there's a crime and you have an outside source who looks into it, like the FBI or whatever, or the Justice Department? I'm trying to find, what is this akin to? What is this like?
Martial law.
Got you. Think martial law. What are we in Poland? What's going on?
Well, they are little czars. They're
right.
The idea being, if a community is so badly mismanaged that it's going to go bankrupt or it can't pay its debts, that you'll put some professional in charge to get the books in order. But see, this again, you're not treating the core problem. These communities can't. It's not always because it's bad. That the corrupt politicians certainly might play a role, or graft, or feather bedding. Those things can all have a role in a community's finances getting out of. But these are poor. These communities would struggle no matter who's in charge of them. So these emergency managers don't have magic wands, and they become like dictators. So there's no. They can make whatever decision they want, and as you say, they don't report to anyone except the governor.
Right.
So, and we have them all across the state, and they're almost always in a minority, in communities that are with large minority populations. I cannot think off the top of my head of a white community that has an emergency manager.
So this is all central. Guys, what I found so appalling is after listening to the governor's State of the State, you know what? I can't say a bad word because we're live streaming, but to hell with you. I don't need your apology. That is empty, it's false, it's disingenuous, it's all those other fancy words you want to use. You just sound like an ass. And quite frankly, as I said, I went to the hearing, okay, and I didn't see him there. And there were 3 busfuls of people who were coming from the state of Michigan. Not everybody was from Flint. These are people who care all over, and they were all demanding, where is the governor? You had people on the oversight committee debate, where is the governor? What? Well, wait a minute. Did y'all subpoena him?
He doesn't accept invitation. He's not subpoenaed. He was invited.
An invitation. Like an Eventbrite invitation. What?
Yeah.
Why isn't he required to come before? So an invitation doesn't mean you have to show up. That subpoena does, though. And for whatever reason, this committee, of course, this committee has got to get on the good foot. I did have a chance to talk to the ranking Democrat on that committee, Representative Elijah Cummings here from Maryland, and I asked him, I said, where's the governor? He said, well, that's what I want to know. So he said, I want you to know we're going to stay on top of this, and we're going to bring the people here that we need to talk about this. So I'm going to be waiting for that. But right now, what I saw last week was inadequate.
Well, there's a story in the Free Press, Detroit Free Press today about Legionnaire's disease, and I think it's probably very likely that we're going to be not forgetting about, but lead poisoning has become secondary to what's happening with Legionnaire's disease and the possible connection or the probable at this point connection to the Flint water. So the governor has a lot to answer for. And this governor, remember, was elected. He was one tough nerd. He was a successful business executive. He was going to bring best business practices to Michigan.
Wow, that sounds familiar.
State like a corporation.
Sounds familiar, Donald Trump.
Republicans control everything in Michigan and have since the Tea Party in 2010 when Governor Snyder was elected. The Republicans control the state Senate. They have such a supermajority that they can't, the Democrats can't block anything in the Senate. They control the House. They control the state Supreme Court, which is ostensibly nonpartisan, but in fact it's not.
Ostensibly.
So they control all the levers of power in the state. And one of the first things they did was they cut taxes on businesses by $2 billion a year. And they got, of course, with the economy's done better since 2010. And so Michigan has made a modest recovery. Well, he's thrown that all away. Every penny that we've saved as a state, or that we've gotten on the plus side, is going away with this Flint crisis. It's going to cost us every penny of that and more. The Moody's and some of the other rating services are getting ready to lower, or warning that Michigan credit rating is probably going to get downgraded. So any successes that he's can, for six years in office, and can say we've had this success in making the economy better, they're going by the boards because of this debacle. And just one decision in Flint is just going to cost. I mean, the building the KWA was $1 billion wasted, I maintain. And now how many billions more are we going to add into it because of this? Because we had no adult supervision. We had nobody with the power or the common sense or the courage or the grit to say, no, you can't do this.
Right.
It's crazy.
It's the courage and the grit. When I talk to people, when I talked to some of the people who were here in Washington last week, it breaks my heart because Jack and I were talking about this. Yes, it's great to have bottled water to drink. I love that you're taking a drink right as I said that, Chauncey. That worked out perfectly. But what about bathing? Jack and I had this conversation. The things we take for granted. These people, they haven't even been able to bathe. They've been, for 2 years, their pasta, like you said, has been swirling around in that nasty water. Their private parts, every orifice of their body. This is horrendous. Who is accountable ultimately to these people? Who is going to make it right for these people? The rashes, the issues now with one woman told me that she has 3 sons, I think, 3 or 4, and they all now have developmental issues. And I said, well, wait a minute, did they have those issues before? She said, no. There is a marked, you can tell when this happened versus, when it started versus when it,
Yeah, that really makes me so mad. That makes me think people need to think about it like this. If there's an earthquake in the Philippines or something, we're going to send aid immediately. If we need to start a war somewhere, we're going to send those big bladders, those big military bladders of water that will feed a city, sustain a city. And yet we're going on almost 2 years that those people, even as I say this, have no help. There's plenty of talk, but no help from
well, I want to know, Where's the Obama administration?
Right.
Because the woman, the EPA person who was, she was the director, I guess, of that region, she
Yes.
was fired. There was no concern. If she showed no concern, then for me, you reflected the Obama administration, thus making it even more lacking on this administration for not giving additional funds for what's happening in Flint.
Right. I mean, during his State of the Union speech, I was tweeting to the president, you know, like, seriously, why is FEMA not there right now? And how could you even have this discussion about the State of the Union when just a few thousand miles away people are suffering? You know, I seriously, I feel terrible about Syria. I think we take a lot of responsibility for what we've done everywhere. But when
if
people
we don't take care of our own people, that's right.
You know, like, seriously, what's this big military budget for? I honestly think the people in Flint would rather take that $1 trillion of military spending and have something they can take a shower in. I mean,
but why do we give, like, we give so much money to other countries. We give a lot of money in aid to Israel, to just on and on and on. And we need some of that money for our own people. You know, this is the United States of America. We're supposed to be this shining example to the world, and this has gotten out. This is now international, and this shows how slowly we are to move on so many issues, but our infrastructure is crumbling, and we need to move quicker, and I am extremely disappointed in the Obama administration.
Well, yeah. My youngest son's an airborne ranger, and we've sent him to Afghanistan twice, which I understand cost $1 million each time.
Jeez.
I don't know what the return on investment for that is, but for that $2 million we spent to send him over, I somehow think if we'd have given him $2 million here and said, here, we want you to do, here's your mission.
That's right.
It would have been better in the long run, and he'd be the first to agree with me when I say that.
Of course, this is unacceptable. If this is an emergency happening right now, and there's world opinion that this is horrible, why has nothing still been done?
I don't know how much. I mean, I'm willing to scream as loud as I need to, and everyone who's a part of this live stream is willing to scream as loud as we need to, but I don't think it needs to be like that. And so, you know, I'm hoping that the ranking Democrat on the committee, the Oversight Committee, is talking to the president. I'm hoping anybody, the Congressional Black Caucus, any entities, everybody needs to get together. Because if the president has so much concern for underprivileged people in this country, well then, we need you to do a little bit more in Flint.
Well, we need adult leadership. We need that adult supervision. We've needed it we needed it in 2009, and we still need it today. We need somebody to take charge here. People are ready to get about solving this problem. And there's plenty of blame to go around. There's all the time in the world to assign that blame. But the real priority today ought to be, what can we do to fix this? Not just in Flint, but everywhere. What is what is the scope of it? And I think at that point it becomes governors and presidents have to take the lead on it.
Exactly, I agree.
It can't be the Salvation Army taking up collections.
That's right.
That's fine.
That's right.
That's not the way. That's not the solution.
A bottle of water.
Can I ask you guys?
Yeah.
Can I ask you guys something, and you don't have to answer if you don't want to, but is there any, because I am tired of hearing about all these political candidates, but is there any political candidate running right now for president who you think might provide that adult leadership like Mike is calling for? I'll start with you, Schatzie.
The oldest of the adults. Yeah, Bernie. Bernie's the only one.
Bernie?
Yeah,
Mike,
he's the only one.
Who do you think, Mike?
That's kind of above my pay grade. I haven't even made up my mind, so I wouldn't want to tell. I wouldn't want to suggest to somebody else who, but I do like people who've had some have accomplished something, and I don't necessarily believe that's any of the politicians. I guess you could say some of the governors have some accomplishments, but I don't really see anybody running for president who just takes my breath away. I just don't see it. That's
Jack. What about you?
I was very, very impressed. I was very, very impressed with Hillary Clinton. She has embraced this issue like no other candidate. In March,
she'll be in Flint soon. Yeah.
In March, she beat the drum. She's the one that is going. She's the reason why there's going to be a debate, a Democratic debate in Flint in March. She was in Flint on Sunday, speaking at a church, and I don't know if you saw that speech. It was 17 minutes, but she was very blackish in this church. She goes on the pulpit, and she was talking about the pain in her heart, how it just went through all her organs and throughout her body, that this was a debacle, this was man-made. She spoke as a woman with a mother. She spoke to the mothers. So she is the candidate that this really resonates with, because it hits the children. She brings that up over and over again. It's the children. Look at what we've done to our children. They are not going to have as bright of futures as somebody who lives in another community. So I think she is going to continue to shine the light on Flint throughout this campaign, but when she's elected, I'm sure it's going to be another piece of paper if she is elected in her mix. So I would not go out on a limb like the mayor of Flint, newly elected, Mayor Weaver, who has endorsed President Clinton.
That was a slip of the tongue, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was. Well, President Clinton. So I think Hillary is really shining the light on Flint right now.
Well, and regardless of what her motives might be, we need as many we need as many people as possible who have her platform to do just that. To Mike's point, though, there has to be an adult doing this, and there's a lot of people in this whole process right now who are just playing games. I don't know what's going on, but I need to feel comfortable that before November hits, that I know who I can trust to help with this issue. And Jack made a point of, Hillary may be mentioning this now, but if she becomes president, it is yet another piece of paper on her desk, and that's where we come in. That's where we come in. We can remain just on top of this and insistent and just annoying as hell if we need to be. Whatever we need to do. She can't get up there in a black church and say a bunch of stuff and make a bunch of promises, because we're going to say, we're holding you to that. I can tell you that.
Well, I don't think she made promises. I think she made an emotional plea. She, spoke to people's hearts. Okay. But in terms of long range, I think the elder person that's running for president, Bernie, he would get it done. Who would get it done? He would get it done, because I think he is sensitive to the poor and to the people, and not to the corporations and privatizing our communities. And that's something.
Here's the thing, Jack.
Okay.
Here's the thing. I hear what you're saying, and I hear my Washington State fella here. He's all Bernie, but we got to talk about who can get elected. And I know people don't want to hear this, but I got to worry about who can get elected. And do you really think Bernie can get elected? We may be off subject a little bit, but not really, because who's sitting in the White House next is really going to count for us. So why not have this discussion?
Well, there's a pragmatic thing to this. You need, this is a problem is a lot bigger than just Flint. It's a problem in every city, every older city in the country, communities across the country. We need to get about the business of rebuilding America. That's what we should be talking about. It shouldn't be a partisan thing. It needs to be Republicans and Democrats alike. It needs somebody who can lead us and share that vision instead of having us squabbling all the time. It needs to be somebody who can take the military-industrial complex and make them retool to rebuild America and say, no, you're not going to build missiles and bombs and be rebuilding Afghanistan and Syria or wherever, Iraq. We're going to rebuild this country, and if you want to make money on it, come on. You know, Hal
That's
Burton
right.
or whoever can get aboard, and we'll rebuild this country. That's what we need from our leaders. And I really don't care if they're Republicans or Democrats, but they gotta rally us all as Americans behind it, behind that vision, behind that mission. It's like the moonshot, you know, but it's bigger.
Right.
It's even bigger.
That's right. That's right. Am I correct? Back in '09, when we were having all these problems, the Bush administration left, and then the Obama administration came in, and we were having a lot of economic problems. Gosh darn it! I was getting ready to say something, and it just escaped me. Oh, righty, it'll come back at some point.
The stimulus.
Oh, I know it was.
Stimulus?
There was a lot, and there was. there was a lot of talk about rebuilding the infrastructure in hopes of getting people back to work. And I can tell you, here in the D.C. area, you know, it's tiny as it is, there was a lot of rebuilding, but the infrastructure here now, you guys, it is a hot poker mess. And it's got to be that way around the country, but we are spending money, giving it to this country, giving it to that country, giving it to this cause, and we're falling apart at the seams. America isn't going to be great anymore. This is Mike's point. We've got to rebuild this up. And we need politicians who are willing to do it.
We were literally living on the investments our grandparents made. I mean, that's criminal. But our grandparents had the vision and had the willingness to pay the price that, I mean, to pay to build these water and sewer systems and to get us clean water. You know, that World War II generation, they rebuilt this country, and we're just not doing it. We don't have the courage. I mean, we got bombed on September 11th. We got attacked on September 11th.
That's right.
And
That's right.
we declared war. We declared war and went to war. And did FDR at Pearl Harbor? He asked Americans to make a sacrifice after Pearl Harbor. What sacrifice were you asked to make after 9/11? Your sacrifice was to accept 2 tax cuts and a new Medicare prescription drug entitlement. You were told to keep shopping. You didn't sacrifice
Keep shopping.
anything.
That's exactly right. Keep shopping, Mike.
This country isn't taking care of itself. But we need leaders. We need people with vision to say, come on, guys, let's put aside all this partisan nonsense and get about this real work that has to get done. This takes sweat and muscle. You know, it's not going to happen overnight.
Yes,
and Mike, it also
costs money. It's going to cost you money.
It's going to take Democrats and Republicans working together, and it's going to take a willingness on both sides to work together. And you know what? That's on us. We elect these people to office. If they're not doing what we want them to do, then we kick their asses out. It's that simple.
Right.
Amen. Amen. We never do, though.
Well, we keep the same people over. Well, you know, I have to say this. No one good wants to run for office because they're hung in effigy. Their family's hung in effigy. It's just like, let's just take people down. And my commentary I did yesterday was about how in Costa Rica, when I went to help a presidential candidate there, it's so different. The election process only lasts for 4 months. You know, instead of this that we have here, do you realize $2 billion will be spent? You know, $1 billion for each candidate. Really? Because we could have taken all that money and we could have started building the infrastructure. This is ridiculous. There's
no mention of political parties in the Constitution that I remember. I mean, there's no mention of them. And yet they control everything if you think about it. They control who gets nominated, who gets elected, what gets done. It's all by these bodies we've created to have no constitutional basis for the people who are always talking about how important it is to respect and follow the Constitution. We're being governed by something that was never mentioned by the Founding Fathers. In fact, the Founding Fathers, from what I understand, kind of feared political parties. So, you know, but at some point you have to do things as a nation, and much the way that FDR did in the 30s. You know, and I know there are people who don't like what he did, but most Americans understood that there was a job to get done.
That's right.
And that's where we are today, again, I believe. I hope.
Well, yeah, I believe and I hope with you. And, you know, Schatzie, with the continued work that you're doing, you know, we're going to keep this this is not going to die. Just the 4 of us, and there's more than the 4 of us, we're not going to let this die. We have loud, proud voices. We know what we're talking about. We know what we expect, and that's not going to change. So this has been a really good discussion. Jack, oh, Mike, let me see the dog.
That's
I am
Morgan.
so on. Oh, hi, darling. Hi, puppy. Jack, this is not what you had in mind, was it? Oh, the woman's ruined it. Hey, puppy, put your puppy back up. Why? We see an animal and we go berserk. What's the puppy's name?
Morgan.
Morgan. Hi, Morgan. We love you here in D.C.
I'm originally from Morgantown, West Virginia. So she's named for my hometown.
Aww. Well, and by the way, that's the next batter up, Mike.
What's that?
Who's running for governor in West Virginia?
Oh,
Jim Justice. Have you ever heard of him?
Yeah, I do. I do know him. He's a very wealthy coal operator. Yes, he's my age, in fact. I think we're the same.
Oh, a young guy.
This guy, Jim Justice, I keep trying to write about him, and I keep not really having the time, but he makes Rick Snyder look like a choir boy.
Come on!
He's quite a wheeler and dealer, and he's got lots and lots of money.
That means he's got Coke money, perhaps. If you've got lots and lots of money, you may have Coke money.
Well, no, he's done it a different way, and he's bad news for West Virginia. So it's really bad.
Well, Jack, how'd we do?
I thought you did fantastic. Do you want to just wrap it up, the show, and then I'll just end it?
I'll just say thank you.
Well, yeah, thanks so much, everybody, for joining our panel today. And we will see you next time.
Thank you, Jack.
Thanks, everyone.